Hello and welcome back to our Photoshop video series. In this video, we'll learn about the brush tool. In your work in Photoshop, you will find yourself using the brush tool in all sorts of scenarios like drawing, painting, erasing and making masks. Now let's begin and open the file I have provided you in the description to follow along with the video. Once you open the file, let's prepare our tool. Look closely at the left hand side panel and see if you have brush and brush presets panel active. If not, go to the window menu, then brush. I have my brush and brush panel in this slim side panel. Let's take out these panels in the open so we can understand this better. Now, in case you see these panels grayed out, means unusable, this is because our brush tool is not active. Press the hotkey B to activate the brush tool and you can see that these panels are now active as well. Now one thing to remember here is that in order to use the brush tool, you will always need a layer, existing or new. Before we move forward to use the brush tool, let me explain you these panels first, so you would know how to use them later. The first panel is the brush presets panel. This panel is like a pencil box. You have variety of brush presets to choose from, and also this gives you a very good visual reference on how a particular brush will make. Photoshop gives you a very large variety of brushes to work with. To choose one, simply click on the brush, and to change the size of the brush, change the value of the size on top of the panel like so. Now with the brush tool active, you can see that as always mouse cursor changes. And a very good thing about this brush tool is that the icon display what the type of brush is active and in what size, in form of a thin outline. This gives you a very good visual representation of what your brush will make. For example, let me choose a brush preset and change its value to 40 pixel. This is how it looks. And upon clicking, this is what this brush makes. It's rather smooth and solid line I am drawing. Now let me choose another less conventional brush and change the size to 60 pixel. Now this is how the brush looks and this is the effect our brush creates. So remember, while using the brush tool, the mouse cursor will always display the type of brush we are using and the size of the brush. This always comes very handy. The next panel is the brush panel. This panel provides you a variety of settings to apply to the brushes which we'll learn later in the video. The brush panel and the brush presets panel go hand in hand with each other. As I select a brush from the brush presets panel, you can see that we are loading the details of that brush in the brush panel below. It is also important to notice the control panel above while using the brush tool. Let me close both of these panels first. Now when you select the brush tool, you can see that the control panel is now displaying variety of options to be applicable on the brush tool. These options and details can be used to select a type of brush and customize it, which means that we don't always need to use those two panels we closed to play with the brush tool. Right now, all you have to worry about the control panel is the brush preset toggle. If we choose to change the current brush and or size, you actively click on the drop down and do so as desired. The next is the folder icon next to this drop down menu. Upon clicking, the brush panel will appear where you have variety of settings option to customize your brush. Now let's do some exercise and practice on this document I have prepared for you. Currently, we are practicing on the practice layer. But now, we'll create a new layer specifically for each type of brush stroke. So let's create a new layer and name it as stamps to practice this first type of brush stroke. Activate the brush tool. Go to the control panel, click on the brush preset drop down, select the hard round brush type and change the size to 20 pixel. Now choose the right color for this exercise. Press I to activate the eyedropper tool. Then pick the color from the stamps we are about to replicate. Now press B to activate the brush tool again and don't worry, the brush tool will remember your last selected brush. If you have done everything right, you should have the right size and type of brush to replicate the first stamp of 20 pixel. Now simply come over to the guide and click once to create a stamp. So, we have created a simple solid circle as we have selected hard rounded brush of 20 pixel. Now it's time to create a stamp of size 60 pixel. This time, instead of going all over to the control panel, simply right click on the canvas and up will pop the brush presets panel. A quick way to change your brush type. Now change the value to the size to 60 pixel. Press enter. The brush should remain the same hard round. Come over to the guide and click on it to create a stamp of 60 pixel. Next, I'll create a stamp of 150 pixel. Right click and change the value of size to 150 and follow the guide to make your stamp. Now we are about to change the brush type. So keeping the value of size at 150, change the brush type to soft round. Now come over to the guide and click once to stamp it. This type of brush is very effective in creating soft edges or glow effect or creating gradient. We'll see all these later in the course. The soft rounded brush doesn't have any edge. It just starts from the center and fades to nothing. The hard rounded brush and soft rounded brush are the most common brush types used in Photoshop. Now quickly right click and change the brush size to 60 pixel and click over on the next guide. Now finally, one more time, change the size of the brush to 20 pixel and click on the last guide we have for stamps. Now next is the freehand type. First of all, press I for the eyedropper tool and pick the color of the freehand exercise pattern. Now change the brush size to 40 pixel and we already have the soft rounded brush selected. Now we need to create a new layer. I can simply continue to draw on the stamps layer, but then I'll not have the flexibility of moving the drawing separately. So press Ctrl Shift N and name the new layer freehands and press enter. Now all things set, start drawing your freehand pattern over the guide, and once complete, press V to see that we can move around the drawing separately and freely. Till now, we have seen how to change the brush types and sizes and how to draw in a freehand manner. Now let's look at some techniques with some keyboard commands. So next, we have a straight line here. There will be various instances in the future where you will need to draw straight lines, and you can do it rather easily with these keyboard commands. For this, let's set the brush type to hard rounded and size to 20 pixel. Use the eyedropper tool to select the color of the straight line for this exercise. Create the new layer and name it straight line. Now, all things set, go to the start of the guide and press and hold Shift key and click on the starting point once. Now without releasing the Shift key, click on the end point of the straight line guide. Upon click, I'll create the straight line. So this is how easily we can create a straight line. Now for the next task, I am going to use the same technique and take it a step further. Create a new layer with the name pointed line. Use the eyedropper tool to pick the pointed line color. Change the size of the brush to 5 pixel and leave the type as it is, hard round. Now hold the Shift key and click on the starting point. Now without releasing, click on the next pointy point. Now still holding the Shift key, keep clicking the point one by one. And we have created the pointed lines without any difficulty. Now for the last task, we will create our own custom brush. Up until now we have used the brush presets with little variation to their sizes. But you can make and customize brushes quite drastically in Photoshop. Let's begin by creating a new layer and name it as custom. Pick the color for the custom brush from the left hand side with eyedropper tool. Now it's time to move ahead from the brush presets and click on the little folder icon on its left on the control panel. This will pop up the brush panel. I have already mentioned earlier that this is the panel where we can customize our brushes. So here we are at its door, knocking to see the possibilities Photoshop have for us in the world of customization. At first glance, you can see that there are a lot of options you can change. For example, here I am going to start with spacing. I will click and drag its slider. As I drag the slider left and right, you can see that the preview on the left side is changing from a seamless line to a dotted one. This is because the line created with single units placed closely enough to create a visually seamless line. Now upon increasing their spacing, the individual entities are getting separated far enough to be visible as another unit of a brush. For now, put the value to around 350%. Let's look at some more options that we can toggle. Select Shape Dynamics. Change the value of Size Jitter to 50%, Angle Jitter to 50% and Roundness Jitter to 50%. These values will randomize the size, angle and roundness of each individual unit in the brush. Next, select Scattering. Increase the scatter value to 750%, count to 3 and count jitter to 20%. Here I have changed the potential value to scatter each unit and how many units will be generated. Now let's go to the guide on the canvas and start to try to draw the line or whatever we are going to get. Here we get quite an interesting effect. Now if you wish to save this brush preset, you can simply go back to the brush panel and on top right corner click on the horizontally stacked lines to drop down a menu and click on the new brush preset, name it scatter and save. Now, if you go to the brush preset panel, you can see that your brush is now available in the panel. This was a brief discussion on brush tool and the end of the video. Practice and explore, and see you in the next video.